My name is Adrian Bartos, publicly known as Stretch Armstrong. I was too young to get involved in it when I got into it. I was, probably, I don't know, in 1980. I lived on the edge of Harlem. I lived on 96th Street in Madison, and I took the 6 train a lot. So the 6 train was like heavily graffitied. And dudes are walking around with boom boxes playing beats, you could just get the hip hop flavor just by living even on the edge of Harlem. And I also went to school with a bunch of kids that were from Harlem and the Bronx, and like one day, like everyone's rapping Rapper's Delight. We were in 5th grade. So how old are you in 5th grade? I mean, you're a little kid. And that's when I got Rapper's Delight, and that also started my obsession with 12-inch singles, not just rap music, but lots of different types of music. At that point, I played drums, so I was always like into beats and whatnot. And then it was in high school that I got turntables, and from listening to like Red Alert and Chuck Chill Out and Marley Marl on the radio, which was the first time I even learned that there was such a thing as a DJ. Of course, I didn't know any DJs, so there was no place to go learn. There was no place to see a DJ. I wasn't old enough to go to clubs. I saw Curtis Blow and AJ Scratch open for The Clash. It must have been like 1983 at the Pier, and I saw AJ Scratch DJing on turntables. That was the first time I ever saw a DJ. That was kind of crazy. I mean, I had no idea. I didn't know that I'd be seeing Curtis Blow. I don't think I even knew who he was. I was totally like bananas for The Clash. It's a vague memory, but I remember going, for some reason, I went to a club in the daytime. I don't know why I was there or who I went with, but I heard a Run DMC record on big speakers for the first time, and the 808 was just, huge. And I remember just thinking, wow, that sound that's pretty good. I like that. New York City in the 80s was like, like living and breathing hip hop. I mean, it was sort of everywhere. Kids were like dancing in the streets, there was graffiti everywhere. The weekend mix shows were, just insane. I mean, you practically lived for Friday night just to hear what Red and Marley were gonna do. It wasn't easy to get turntables back then. There weren't a lot of stores that carried 1200s. Some of them did, but then you had to have the right cartridges that would track so you could scratch, and then to get your Gemini mixer, that often meant going someplace else. So just getting the equipment was often a pain in the ass. And I had enough money to buy one 1200, so I had one, and then I didn't have a mixer, so I brought it home, and I took my parents' belt-driven turntable from their stereo, and I connected one of the channels from that turntable into the left channel, and one from my Techniques into the right, put it in mono, and then I used the balance as a mixer. So that's how I started mixing before I got a mixer. That was really just a kind of a fun hobby thing to do at home. I mean, again, I wasn't old enough to even go to clubs, so I didn't really have any experience listening to DJs live. That happened when, after senior year, I started going out and then seeing DJs live. I mean, I saw the potential for what one could do with records. I often felt like there were good DJs that I was listening to, in terms of what they were playing, but I wasn't that taken by the DJs, and I was thinking like, God, I want to do this and I want to do it better. And then I did all the stupid things that young DJs do. You make demo tapes and you pester club managers and you hand them tapes that they, throw in the wastebasket. The way that I even got on as a DJ professionally in the first place was because I went to Columbia University, And a friend of mine and I started throwing parties near campus. Those parties got really big, and then we took the parties downtown to clubs. And that's how I got sort of heard for the first time. And my parents were always supportive of anything that I wanted, anything that would make me happy. As long as it wasn't, anything that was harmful. When we got on in '90, some of the shows from the '80s still existed, but they didn't really have it felt like the excitement around those shows had sort of dissipated. And it also felt like we were stepping into a vacuum. And I think that's why what we did was so quickly and enthusiastically received by people that were already hip hop fans, but also kids that were just coming into it. And for the most part, I mean, with the exception of like the Jungle Brothers, Q-Tip, Run DMC, Eric Sermon, for the most part, Ultramagnetic, those were all artists that had already been established in the 80s. And my show was more about, ushering in the next generation. So with the exception of all the artists I just mentioned who did come on the show, the majority of the artists that we championed were unsigned or indie and new. When the show started, obviously we had to reach out to artists and labels and let people know that the show existed. And the first show we had, the first two shows we had Def Jeff, MC Search, Two Kings and a Cypher. Jungle Brothers were really early on, so we kind of hit the ground running. But Bobbito worked at Def Jam. I was interning at Def Jam for Bob when I got the show. So we were connected, and Bob did radio promotions for Def Jam, so he already had like a really great relationship with all the other mix shows. It'd be Awesome 2. I'm not even going to try to remember all the shows back then, but there had been a tradition of competition between mix shows, obviously with WBLS and KISS, which was like war, and so I think that it's almost like a tradition of competition. But Bobbito really, to his credit, I think was largely responsible for actually creating a community among all the shows. He made a point of mentioning when all the other shows were on the air every week, and I think that ended up being reciprocated. And it sort of became like, when artists would come to New York, or artists that were in New York that had to do a promo run, it kind of became a very clear sort of itinerary of the shows you had to do. Either do this show, this show, and this is what my week's going to look like. And Bob really had a lot to do with that. I mean, there were moments when certain artists would come up and spit, and it was just like perfection, Big L, Nas, even some artists that didn't even go on to, that you wouldn't even know who they were, because when Nas was up there, he wasn't even signed yet, so he wasn't a big deal in that regard. He was a big deal to us because we knew how. We knew what this guy meant. I mean, I'm just looking at him like, this is like Rakim #2. Crazy. At the time, Bob and I, we were best friends. We lived together, and we'd be doing the show, and then maybe like Busta Rhymes is there, like his dreadlocks are like this long. He's just got little twists, and he's killing it. And he's not a star yet, but like we're feeling it so hard because in many regards, like in some ways, these young artists, they were stars to us because of just how incredible they were. I mean, it makes sense that many of them would go on to become superstars because you could feel that, immediately. And during some of these sessions, Bob and I we would look at each other and just sort of like a quiet acknowledgement to each other, like, how fucking lucky are we right now? Like, we're on the radio doing this in New York City. It was magical, really. People to this day don't know that I did that Little Kim, that really pornographic Little Kim record. Big Mama thing. But either before or around the time that No Time dropped, that was Big Mama thing was like a big street record. It was bootlegged on 12-inch, and like all the DJs were playing it, mixtapes, clubs, everything. And that was kind of interesting because I was obviously known to be like the, one of the torchbearers for, underground hip hop. And now, while Little Kim back then was by no means whack, she was still more of like a tunnel Sunday night Hot 97 type of artist. So for me to have produced that record, I mean, to this day, it kind of surprises people. But making that record was really fun because Biggie was there, and I'd known Biggie from the show from before he was signed, and anyone, you've probably heard it a million times, Biggie was like one of the funniest, most gregarious, guys ever. In addition to being incredibly talented, I mean, he just wanted to get high and tell jokes, and he was funny. And Little Kim was very serious and but Biggie and I were fucking carrying on, and he was just a riot. It was a lot of fun. One really amazing experience I had was at the Roskilde Festival in Denmark. Yeah, outside of Copenhagen. Big festival, like, there'd be a big stage with like Metallica, and then there'd be like a hip hop reggae tent, which is where I would be. And this one year it was Supercat, Craig Mack, and me. And I ended up back at the hotel, and Supercat was in the garden outside of my window, walking around, smoking a big spliff and reading a Bible. And I said hi to him. He ended up coming upstairs and ended up coming into my room, and we hung out for like half an hour, which was, I mean, I look back at that, it's just such a crazy thing. I don't know if Supercat means much to you, but it's just a massively iconic and kind of intimidating, entity. Supercat, the Dam Dada, and there I was in my room listening to a reggae tape I made. It's crazy. The biggest challenge, which has been an ongoing struggle for a long time, even back when I first got on the radio, was trying to manage my role in hip hop, and at the same time as a sort of music-loving DJ that's not just about hip hop. And my reputation from the radio, sort of to this day, precedes me, and people sort of expect me to, be that guy, and I'm only that guy to the degree that I did these things, but I'm not even versed in what's going on in hip hop right now. I don't follow it. If I hear something that's great, I enjoy it, but I don't. It's not really my profession. I'm not on the radio. I do clubs, but I don't play underground hip hop because people have a misconception about why I stopped loving hip hop. But when you experienced what we did in the 90s, there's really nothing that can compare to it. And I know that young people have their scene right now, and they love it, and that's great. And it's always like that. Young people are always going to come in, and take our places, and be really passionate about the scenes that they're a part of. And I'm not detracting that from it in any way, but my personal experience, you can't compare. I can't compare what happened in the 2000s even to what happened in the 90s. It's just, it doesn't work for me. And I'd rather let something be and have, remember it for what it was than beat my head against the wall trying to, recreate it or live up to it. I love the 80s more than anything because there was a certain just rawness to it. And the 90s was interesting because it, things started getting a little bit more sophisticated. Artists started becoming a little bit more aware of how labels worked and how you had to market yourself and how you had to write songs and how you had to craft these sort of personas and stories. And then producers started getting a lot more sophisticated. And for a little while, New York was running shit, whether it was Pete Rock or Large Professor or Q-Tip and Ali Shahi or the Beat Miners or even like DJ Muggs, who's from New York, making really New York records in LA. That was just an incredible time for production. I mean, like the records that would come, DJ Premier, and those guys are all still doing amazing things. But what was happening then was, I mean, that's the diamond right there. I think I'm blessed that I've been able to live a life that's supported by doing what I do. Playing music. I mean, I'm musically obsessed. Always have been. Still am, always will be. And then in terms of what we did, I mean, I love the fact that to this day, people that know recognize that the show that we did really had a really pivotal role in setting off like a lot of important shit that still means something today. And sometimes people, gas me up. Oh, you broke Eminem, you broke Jay-Z, and it's like, we didn't break these artists, but we planted the seeds. And if the show we had on KCR was the only radio show, that none of these artists would have gotten anywhere. That show was a stepping stone to maybe more shows, and then maybe to commercial mix shows, which was then would lead to maybe getting rotation on a commercial station. So I'm always very careful to correct people, say, no, we didn't break these artists, but I am aware of the role we played in the inception of both individual artists, but also sort of a cohesive scene that turned into what is now really a global phenomenon, although we know what's happened since then. I mean, for me as a DJ, I've always sort of followed my heart, and often that meant not doing exactly what people wanted me to do. I guess that really sort of means be yourself, be true to yourself. I mean, that's kind of trite and corny, but I think it's kind of true. And I think that's also why people from a wide variety of economic, racial, social backgrounds loved our radio show. I mean, we were a fucking nerdy white guy, that'd be me, and a Puerto Rican, a Wesleyan educated Puerto Rican from the Upper West Side had this show that was, being, bumped in college dorms on Long Island, in the hood, in the projects, in the prison system. And I think people gravitated towards the show, not just because of the music we championed, but because of who we were and how we represented ourselves, which is just, we weren't trying to be, hip hop clowns.